So we just got a huge update on the Rashee Rice situation, and not only is he about to get suspended here very soon, but a pretty unexpected receiver could benefit from this happening if you combine that with the fact that they just let another wide receiver go yesterday. This of course will not sit well with some Chiefs fans, and some might even say the wide receiver room just got worse. Well, in today's video, I'll break this entire situation down from the good to the bad and even the ugly of the Rashee Rice suspension that is coming and how the offense can handle things during his absence. But first, how about those? Alright, we finally have an update on Rashee Rice stemming from the situation that happened back on March 30th of 2024 in Texas. Gotta talk about it. We all remember that he was essentially racing on the highway, lost control of his car, and was part of triggering a 6-car pileup on the highway during rush hour traffic. Rice was driving a Lambo SUV traveling around 119 miles per hour just prior to the collision, while his friend, Theodore Knox, who was driving Rice's Corvette, if I'm remembering correctly, was traveling 116 miles per hour but managed to get down to 91 just before impact. From there, Rice and company all fled the scene and were nowhere to be found when police arrived. Cell phone footage combined with dash cam footage showing the wreck helped quickly discover that Rice was involved, but even without that footage, both vehicles were tied to Rashee Rice, so it wouldn't have been that difficult to figure out. Anyway, Rice was then facing multiple charges, both criminal and civil, but the Texas courts were extremely backed up and showed very little progress, if any at all. That led some to believe Rice could actually play out the entire 2025 NFL season and face a suspension at some point during the 2026 season. Multiple practicing lawyers thought this could be a very real possibility because of how backed up the Texas courts were. But then basically out of nowhere, today, we got updates to basically every charge, and that means a suspension is most likely happening here very soon, potentially even to start the NFL season. Seth Kaiser shared that criminal files are supposed to be public, and literally no one found a court file number, so it's confusing how this was almost kept completely under wraps while managing to completely resolve it. It certainly is pretty crazy, but a result was expected at some point, and that's what I kept telling people from other fan bases especially that would say, why isn't Rice suspended yet? Well, once the legal process finishes up, the NFL is going to do an investigation of their own, and he is going to get suspended. So now things are expected to move pretty quickly, even though it took nearly a year and a half to get to this point. Before I get to the suspension and how that could impact the offense during Rice's absence, here's the update we all found out today. Rice settled one of his civil cases yesterday, agreeing to pay just over $1 million in fees to settle it. There might be one more, but from there, he pleaded guilty to 2 separate third-degree felony charges: collision involving serious bodily injury and racing on a highway causing bodily injury. The result of Rice pleading guilty is that he's been sentenced to 30 days of jail time and 5 years of probation. And get this, Rice can serve the jail time at any point during the 5-year probationary period. On top of that, Rice received deferred adjudication, so if he completes the parameters of his probation entirely and successfully, the case will be dismissed. That means he won't have a felony conviction or any conviction on his record if he completes the terms of his probation. From what I understand, the 30 days of jail time is not negotiable and must be served, but he has 5 years to do it and can serve that in smaller chunks of time. I would imagine that's all done during portions of the offseason, or shoot, maybe even pieces of it could be done during his actual suspension from the NFL, which again is most likely happening this season. Before I get into more details on that, there was a statement released today by both the district attorney and Rice's attorney featuring a quote from Rice himself. In this statement, they summarized the details of the high-speed crash during rush hour traffic, with the big piece to me being this, quote, "This caused a chain reaction that affected multiple vehicles, and after the collision, Mr. Rice failed to check on the welfare of the victims and fled on foot." That is for sure the toughest look of all of this, in my opinion. However, in Rice's part of the statement, he said he's spent a lot of sleepless nights thinking about the damages his actions caused. He apologized again, saying he's profoundly sorry for the physical damages to persons and property, as well as the harm caused to innocent drivers and their families. He's aiming to make sure everyone everyone impacted will be made whole. And since he pled guilty, that 5 years of probation and 30 days of jail time is all part of the plea deal. He also is required to pay restitution to all the victims for their out-of-pocket medical expenses. The DA added that he hopes Rice takes this as an opportunity to mature and leads by example moving forward, and noted that they are extremely fortunate that no lives were lost that day. And I think that's definitely something to be grateful for out of this wild situation, because not everybody ends up that lucky. Think of Henry Ruggs' situation. He was drafted by the Raiders years back, and his poor choices of speeding while also under the influence led to the loss of life, a lady as well as her dog, and Ruggs was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison and is still serving that to this day. So Rice was definitely fortunate that any injuries sustained during this were much more minor in comparison. All right, so now that we know the results of the criminal charges, the NFL is going to act, and probably pretty quickly. Adam Schefter shared today that the NFL now can expedite its disciplinary process, and Rice is likely to receive a multi-game suspension this season. They honestly probably already know how many games they will most likely suspend him because, as the NFL PR guy Brian McCarthy said today, quote, "We have been closely monitoring all developments in the matter, which remains under review." I mean, everything was caught on camera. It was just a matter of the legal process playing out, and unless it's domestic violence or sexual assault, they typically don't act until the legal system hands out their own verdict. With that being said, the NFL is also a bit inconsistent in how harsh or light their suspensions can be. Again, unless it's DV or SA, that's a minimum of 6 games. If I had to put money on it though, I'm personally expecting somewhere around a 4-game suspension, and it starting week 1 of this season. Of course, it could potentially be a bit less, or even a couple games more than that. Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest talked with some sources within the Chiefs organization, and they are of the belief his suspension will be 2 to 4 games. So I'm going more worst case as far as suspension time. And this is minor in the grand scheme of things, but since Rice was a second-round pick, his contract is not fully guaranteed, and he will end up forfeiting $70,304 per week that he misses due to suspension this season. Something else to note is that even if Rice is suspended as early as week 1, he can still participate in all of training camp and every preseason game. He then cannot practice with the team during his suspension, nor attend games even as a spectator. Rice also will not take up a roster spot during the time he's suspended. Instead, he will be placed on the reserve suspended list, which doesn't count against a team's roster limit. That means the team can sign or promote a wide receiver in Rice's place, which they will definitely do, probably a bottom of the roster guy, and it's going to be worth watching during training camp to see who kind of climbs the ranks. Or do the Chiefs actually consider maybe signing a veteran that's still a free agent? That remains to be seen. And that begs the question, what are the Chiefs actually going to do about the wide receiver room as an offense while he's gone, and how is this going to impact them as a whole? All right, well, let's process through that. You look at your receiving leaders from last year. Obviously, Kelsey and Gray in the tight end room are going to keep holding it down, but Xavier Worthy is going to be the guy for Patrick Mahomes. And then kind of a guy that really needs to step up is going to be Hollywood Brown. He didn't play most of the season last year with the injury, came back, didn't look quite right, or he looked a little bit out of sync with the offense. I just feel like everything was moving. You had DeAndre Hopkins in the mix. You were just trying to survive. You had no Rice at that point either, and you're not going to have Rice now. You basically operate like the offense did last year. No Rashee Rice, but you also don't have DeAndre Hopkins or Justin Watson. They are gone. You drafted Jalen Royals in the 4th round, but I'm going to temper expectations on the rookie because even Worthy last year, who was drafted in the 1st round, it took him until the back half of the season to come alive, but come alive he did. And that's why I think I'm expecting probably the biggest impact player in the wide receiver room to be Worthy. 50 catches on 65 targets for 572 yards and 5 touchdowns in his final 8 games last season. He's going to play a huge piece in that. Hopefully the running back room with Pacheco healthy, Kareem Hunt a full offseason. You got Brashard Smith in there as well as Elijah Mitchell. Hopefully that running back room can be a bit more effective and help out the offense as a whole. Combine that with a more stable left tackle. And I do like the odds of the Chiefs winning several of these games to begin the season if Rice does start out suspended, but it's not going to be easy. Before I get to a couple more wide receiver thoughts on who could maybe step up or even be targeted in free agency, here's the Chiefs' first 4 games of the season. So let's say Rice is suspended. You have the Chargers, Eagles, Giants. That should be a W, but then the Ravens. That is 3 out of 4 very tough opponents without your perceived to be wide receiver 1 in Rashee Rice. So if he gets suspended to start the season, that's going to be tough. Another guy to be looking out for in the wide receiver room is probably going to be Juju Smith-Schuster, offset Travis Kelce in the middle of the field. He's very QB friendly, great against zone coverage, and Mahomes really trusts him. As far as bottom of the roster and how this kind of changes things, you just look at everybody who was fighting for that wide receiver 6-7 spot and shift them up one, again, if you don't add a guy in free agency. So I would say, hey, as of yesterday, I would have said it's a battle potentially between Justin Ross and Sky Moore for the bottom of the roster now. Tyquan Thornton, the former second-round pick of the Patriots, he's in the mix for sure as well. Speedy guy. Andy Reid loves that, so I'm not going to rule him out. But Justin Ross is gone. He got waived yesterday, asked to be let go, and the Chiefs granted it. He might be kicking himself now because he had a higher chance of making the roster, at least to start the season, with Rashee Rice suspended. But yeah, that means Sky Moore could very well sneak onto the roster once again this year. Love that or hate that, he's going to be in the mix for the bottom of that wide receiver room, and a suspension does shift the pecking order just a little bit as far as the bottom guys moving up one. Now, as far as free agent wide receivers go, the Chiefs could take a flyer. They have a little bit more cap space now that Trey Smith got his long-term deal done. They're closer to $20 million in cap space available rather than 11. That also hopefully goes towards a McDuffie and or George Karlaftis extension. I talked much more in detail about that in yesterday's video, but here's some of the top available wide receivers that you could bring in, and I would do it sooner rather than later so they can get brought up to speed and use training camp as a time to learn the playbook and kind of just drink through a fire hose. But you got Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Gabe Davis, Nelson Aguilar. A lot of people like the idea of Gabe Davis, outside receiver that you could use. He is a veteran, but you could also, in theory, use Jalen Royals there. So it's just a question, do they think somebody like Gabe Davis could learn quickly enough versus a rookie like Jalen Royals? And we all know that takes time for rookies to develop in an Andy Reid offense. Anyway, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly with the Rashee Rice suspension. The good is we now know it's happening and we can just get it out of the way. Hopefully he learned from this and just learns to be more responsible when driving. The bad news is he's getting suspended, and the offense is going to have to absorb a big loss because he was on fire through the first 3 weeks of the season last year before that knee injury. And then the ugly is it's just the reality that when you mess up off the field, make mistakes, you're going to have to pay the consequences for it. So that's 5 years probation and 30 days of jail time. Make sure to let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments down below. What do you expect from the offense during Rice's absence? I am assuming he starts the season suspended, but it could be in the middle of the season. So you never really know, and you never really know for how long. The NFL is rather inconsistent. But let me know your thoughts on all that in the comments down below. What you think the Chiefs are going to do in the offense. Do you elevate somebody like Sky Moore or Tyquan Thornton that is fighting for the bottom of the roster after Nico Remigio, who's the team's returner? Or do you go and look at free agency and try to add a guy on a cheap deal, take a flyer on him? Let me know all that in the comments down below. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?